Hello, everyone, and welcome to CPA Academy. My name is Christopher, and I'm happy to welcome you into today's webinar on 7 tips to expand your margins and increase revenue with client account services. Our presenter today is Ed Warren, and before we get started, I wanted to go through some housekeeping items and do some quick technical checks to make sure that everything is working for you. So first, if you don't mind going to the GoToWebinars control panel, this is on the right-hand side of your screen. And please let me know that you can hear the sound of my voice and see the slides that Ed has up on his screen, and feel free to share where you're listening in from. We're starting to see some responses pour in. Thank you so much for your participation and engagement today. We are so excited to have each and every one of you here with us today. Now, if anyone's having any technical trouble, please let me know in this same questions panel. And keep in mind, while there are quite a few of you, there's only one of me, so I will get around to every one of you as quickly as I can. And now that we know things are working, let's go through some housekeeping for credit. This is a 1-hour webinar and qualifies for 1 CPE credit. The way you earn that credit is fairly straightforward. Just stay logged in for 50 minutes of our allotted time and to answer the poll questions. We'll have a total number of 4 polls during today's webinar, and to earn full credit, you'll need to answer at least 3 of those polls. CPE will be issued by the end of the day today and will be available in your CPA Academy account. And I also want to let you know we are recording today's webinar, and the archive will be made available by the end of the day as well. And if you have a moment before we get started, visit the handout section of that control panel. And this is where you're going to find presentation materials to go along with today's presentation. Now that we're all set, let's turn today's webinar over to our presenter. Ed, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Christopher. Hello, everyone. I see some of you have signed in from Chicago, Long Beach, and Miami. I am signing in from Washington, D.C. Welcome. I am looking forward to working with you today. I have been working in the accounting, marketing, and business development area since 2012, and did that work in 2 different accounting firms. I now work for a firm that supplies accounting services practices. So sit back. I hope to make our session both interesting and informative, and I look forward to our chat. So as I mentioned, I've been in accounting, marketing, and business development for 8 years. I have over 25 years of sales and marketing experience, also as a leader in sales and business development and marketing teams. In my last CPA firm, which was a top 100 firm, I did business development for nonprofit and hospitality industry sectors. I also supported the client accounting services practice there and closed my largest deal in that space was a $16,000 a month engagement with first-year fees of $225,000 a year. So I am a believer in accounting services as an area of focus in the consulting services line for CPA firms, and I believe in the power of the advisory relationship that comes along with that CAS relationship. So my contact information is on this slide. My email address, I am pretty active on LinkedIn, less so on Twitter, but you'll see stuff there occasionally. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. I will get a record of any questions that we don't get to during the session. So if I miss something, I will try and follow up online. And the title of our webinar today is 7 Tips for Growing Margins and Revenues in Your Client Accounting. And the first one of those is finding your niche. One of the things that both CPA.com and the AICPA recommend as you're trying to build an accounting services practice is to find a niche and focus on that before trying to be a generalist. For those of you who've been in the profession for a number of years, you know that folks who develop a niche and local knowledge and expertise tend to be able to build a following and a more profitable practice than the folks that are operating as generalists. Not that there's anything wrong with being a general practitioner, but part of what folks are paying for with a client accounting services engagement is the level of knowledge and expertise you bring to them. In terms of looking at where practices are most successful, these are the top 3 leading segments or industry niches for client accounting services practice. And professional services is a broad term, and in that you could find medical, dental, veterinary, architectural engineering, law firms. So that's a pretty big bucket, and again, I'd recommend that you pick one of those as a starting point. Small business or entrepreneurial business or entrepreneurial services groups are another area. Small businesses tend to have similar needs and similar concerns. And of course, with most businesses, and certainly small businesses, cash flow and projecting for cash flow is particularly important. So understanding the needs of small businesses can be a great segment as well, although not a traditional niche. And then finally, nonprofits. Because nonprofits are so concerned with overhead and just how folks that are looking at their 990s perceive admin as an expense. Many nonprofits, especially in the area where I live, which has lots and lots of nonprofits and large numbers of associations, many of them will have a chief financial officer and no accounting department, or they may have a chief administrative officer and have no finance staff at all, but have financial oversight sit with somebody else on executive row. As I said earlier, CPA.com, which is a great resource if you are already running an accounting services practice or thinking about starting one. There is a certification that you can get on client accounting services of, I believe, 4 client accounting services workshops that are offered by CPA.com. One of the foundations of their training is that you pick an industry, focus on that industry, grow it, become the trusted advisor for your clients. Obviously, when you're building a niche, one of the things you want to do is you want to go to the industry conferences and potentially speak and become a known expert. That will also help you build your practice. Again, in figuring out where you want to build your practice, understand who the best types of clients are that you want to engage. Certainly, if you are choosing, let's say, a medical or a dental specialty, you may want to have a specialty within that specialty. But again, understanding the buy-sell transactions when people are buying into or selling a practice, working with folks if they're starting right out of medical or dental school and building a long-term relationship, providing tax planning. These are the kinds of things that will set you apart from somebody else who just happens to have CPA after their name. So building that particular expertise is important. Christopher, this is a great place for us to do our first polling question.
Absolutely. We are now launching polling question number 1 of 4. Will be popping up on your screen now. We'll have a total of 4 polls during today's course. This is the very first one. How old is your client accounting service practice? 1 year or less, 2 to 3 years, 4 to 5 years, or greater than or equal to 6 years. And we'll leave each of these open for about 1 minute or until we get to 95% of our responses in. And I see that we are at 30 seconds and at 94. So I will leave this open for just a bit longer till we get that last percent. And we'll close this in 3, 2, and 1. And back to you.
Great. Thank you, Christopher. So we're going to move on to our next question, having your growth plan. Understanding who your best opportunity and how to hit the ground running. Let's say you are an audit practitioner in a small to mid-sized firm. what's your best way of growing the practice? Well, a number of approaches. One data point I'll share with you is that when CPA.com did their last benchmarking survey of client accounting services practices, they found that only 41% of firms were happy with their, said another way, almost 60% of firms are unhappy with their growth rate. So one of my challenges to you, especially if you're on the coming out of the starting gate with your practice or trying to grow your practice, is figure out tactically where you can have your quickest wins. I mentioned audit earlier. If you're an audit manager or an audit partner in your firm and you're thinking about setting up an accounting services practice, first thing I'd ask you to do is brainstorm on the list of clients where you're doing audit. You have recurring management letter issues with a client, where you have lots and lots of adjusting journal entries that you have to do before you really get started with the audit. If you have audit clients that aren't doing a terribly good job of running their accounting department, that may be an opportunity to develop an outsource relationship. I'm actually talking with a couple of partners from a local firm that don't have a practice, and one of the things that I am talking with them about, and we'll probably talk more about, is how do you convert some of those clients, and what are the trigger points? I mentioned picking a niche and growing that niche. You know, if you want to grow a large and robust accounting services practice, you'll grow and then master it, and then either bring in a new niche or potentially acquire a practice that's a different area. There's a local firm that I've started a relationship with. In this case, they have 3 partners and a total of 25 people in their practice, and they work with nonprofits, they work with some government contractors, they work with some small and medium businesses, and they work with some professional services firms. That practice and that number of people over the course of about 12 years. So this is not something you can necessarily build overnight, but if you build with the idea of diversifying and getting greater experience so that you can cover more than 1 or 2 specific verticals successfully, that's a great growth plan. Next up is staffing. Every firm that I've worked with and every firm I've prospected has a different staffing model for client accounting services. Many firms that I've worked with, especially those that operate in smaller markets, have paraprofessionals and full-time bookkeepers. But some firms that I'm working with and that I'm prospecting don't have bookkeepers on staff. They staff their client accounting services practices with staff seniors. And I'm not passing judgment on whether it's right or wrong to have paraprofessionals. What I'm saying primarily is that that provides you with a completely different, if you're dealing with non-certified professionals or paraprofessionals that are part of your team. And important both from a hiring perspective, but also when you look at the cost of doing the work, and we'll get more into that in our subsequent slides. One of the other data points that was interesting from the 2018 CPA.com benchmarking report is that about half of firms that provide outsourced accounting services do some outsourcing, and that is certainly not a new concept. I think CPA firms at large have outsourcing at some level or another, I think since as early as the 1970s. There have been both major firms and smaller firms that are sending work offshore, whether that is to South America to Asia to the Philippines. So that is an option. Again, referring to TA.com's benchmarking report, they have sort of a proposed or an ideal staffing model. I will say to you that this particular model is probably well suited to a team with 10 or more people, because you have a fairly large segregation of work here. You've got essentials doing accounts receivable, accounts payable, and payroll. Then you have an accounting manager, virtual controller, virtual CFO, and potentially, partner and director level folks. Again, this is a larger business model. One of the ways that you can realize additional savings on margin is to use some external resources to handle some of the less expensive work. This slide demonstrates that you can do bookkeeping at the $9 an hour less figure if you're offshore of that bookkeeping work. And again, depending on the size of your practice, if you're staffed with staff seniors primarily, and then you have supervisors or managers and then partners that are managing the whole effort, you could literally have 3 to 4 full-time equivalents just doing bookkeeping transaction, accounts payable, accounts receivable, time entry for payroll. Can become a fairly expensive way of doing bill.com entries. By comparison, if you were doing that bookkeeping work with a paraprofessional or bookkeeper, and these are loaded labor rates, and these are also labor rates for my market, which is Washington, D.C. What I'll say, typically in the D.C. market, a paraprofessional or bookkeeper is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $45,000 to $55,000 a year plus benefits. So what I calculated as a loaded labor rate, that's adding 30% for benefits and so forth, is that paraprofessional hourly rate is $28 an hour. Simple math means that that's going to be about 3 times more expensive than offshoring bookkeeping. By the same token, if you're staffing your practice with staff seniors, again, in the DC market, a staff senior is going to be about $84,000 a year. You add a 30% benefit load to that, that ends up around $105,000 or $53 an hour. So you can see where there's some potential for margin savings. This is a breakdown of what some of those resources would cost. I mentioned paraprofessionals. There are some firms that use a person that they call a data coordinator. That's really just someone who's doing data entry, and you can get those people, again, in specific markets at about $19 an hour. So this is really labor rates at different levels. And again, these are going to vary based on market and based on who you have doing specific discrete tasks. But the point in bringing this all up is that if you were to look at a traditional margin model, and this is an example of a client that I worked with at my last firm, where we were billing about $14,000 a month. We were using the prevailing staffing model, which I was just showing you, with CFO advisory at about 4 hours a month, controllership going up at supervisor, and then going up at data coordinator level. At the end of the day, the original model, which used domestic bookkeepers to perform accounts payable, receivables, expense tracking, bank reconciliations, that type of thing, you see that the gross margin came in at a little over $10,000 a month. By using offshore bookkeeping, you're able several $100s a month just with this one account. When you multiply that at a full-time labor rate across multiple clients, you're looking at potentially several $1,000s a month in margin savings. And again, that's money that goes into the partnership, that goes into staff salaries, that goes into partner trial. So that's really the margin piece that we're talking about in this model. And I think, Christopher, this is where we can take that next poll.
Absolutely. Here is poll number 2 of 4. What are your client accounting services revenues? Less than 500,000, 500 to 999,000, 1 million to 2 million, or more than 2 million. And I see that we already have over 80% of your responses in with just 20 seconds. Thank you so much for your engagement today. We'll leave this open for a few more seconds until we get to that 95% mark. And remember, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the questions panel. And if you're having issues seeing the poll box, simply refresh your screen or make sure you don't have another window in front of it. Sometimes another one of our computer windows can just open up right in front of that. We'll leave this open for about another 5 seconds. And we'll close this in 3, 2, and 1. Ed, back to you.
All right, great. Thank you, Christopher. So next up is having a sales and marketing plan. And also having sales and marketing resources. Not everybody that's on this call is going to be in a large firm that has deep resource pools. The last firm I worked for had over 200 employees. Our business development and marketing team was 5 full-time people. I was director of that team and also a business developer at one point. So we had fairly deep resources. If you're in a small firm, if you're just in the process of trying to start your own cloud accounting practice, you might need to start with a consulting relationship or some part-time resources. But it's tremendously important to have a plan. And if you don't have that native skill for building client relationships, bring in some pros. One thing I'll say is, in the environment I worked in, we were building, 100 and 200 plans. You don't have to do that. If you're starting, for example, and you want to build a dental client accounting services practice, one of the first things you're going to need to do is build a website and find somebody who understands building websites, who understands WordPress, because that's the market leading template-based website platform. Someone who understands search engine optimization, search engine marketing, and the kinds of keywords that you're going to need to use to have your clients find you. One of the most important things that I think many accountants lose track of is that, well, honestly, we could be talking about professional services, we could be talking about people who sell consumer goods. In today's market, where so much is available on our devices, somewhere between 60 and 70% of the shopping that happens, or the research that happens before anybody buys a product, happens before they pick up the phone, before they walk into a store, before they call your firm. So if you're designed to be a go-to resource for dental practices in the Toledo area, one of the things that you're going to have to make sure of is that if somebody searches for a fractional CFO or an accounting and bookkeeping provider, fill in the blank, there are lots of terms that you might want to optimize for. But if somebody who is starting or buying into a dental practice is looking for somebody to do their books for them and they don't find you online, you will not have an opportunity to do business with them. I hear all the time from everyone from managing partners to staff seniors that the best clients come from referrals, and that may be true. You may get some very, very good clients from referral, but if you aren't building a search optimized website that has persona specific content, and by that I mean those dentists who are looking for tax sheltering opportunities, who are looking for the most generous 401k or SEP or other retirement plans that they can get their employees to participate in so that they can come. If you don't know these things and you're not talking about your knowledge and you're not sharing this through blog content, through podcast, through content marketing, you may be losing out on opportunities. One of another data point from the CPA.com webinar, and I'm not getting paid for referencing these guys. I bring them up because they have great resources. CPA.com is the technology arm of the AICPA, and they have been for 10 or 15 years trying to help accountants use technology to become more efficient, more effective, and more profitable. I will tell you that there is another version of this report. It should be out sometime in the next couple of months. I think it is closed for new data, but it opened up, I believe, for survey data. And interesting to bring this up now because it has very much to do with the selling and marketing process. In the sales portion of this benchmarking survey, they gave the top 3 reasons why accounting services providers felt like they were failing at closing sales. These are the top 3. Prospects were price sensitive, client value, client accounts, or they were too busy doing client work to find time to sell. And I'm going to knock these down in order. First, prospects are price sensitive. One of the things that you have got to do when you are building your sales and marketing plans and when you're going on sales calls and when you are qualifying opportunities is you're going to have to do some evangelism, because client accounting services, even though it's been around for years and years and it used to be called write-up and back office accounting and lots of other things, the reality of what you're doing is you're essentially replacing what would be an internal accounting department, or you're replacing a bookkeeper, and you're replacing that bookkeeper and you're overlaying that with with CFO advisory. And I don't want you to lose focus on the advisory piece of this, because that is the value of what you do. The biggest difference between an internal accounting department and an accounting services relationship is an internal accounting department is going to churn out numbers and financial statements, which are very, very important, but they're historical. Part of the value of what you do as an accounting services provider is to provide bulletproof financial statements every month and potentially providing data for and things. And while that is important, where the CAS provider truly shines is the KPIs, the dashboards, and the forward-thinking advice that they're providing for their clients. So when I hear that clients are price sensitive, my antenna go up and say, okay, they're not price sensitive. They don't understand the value of what you're trying to provide, or the value of the service that you're trying to tell them or sell them, excuse me. And I bring that up because if you are properly framing the discussion the choice really becomes a little bit of a no-brainer. I'll give you a perfect example. I partnered with a friend of mine who's a local CPA to close a deal that I uncovered while I was at my last accounting firm. It took several years, but in this case, the opportunity came because a 72-year-old CPA of this $5 million industry association was retiring this summer. I reached out along with my colleague to Jim, his CEO, and to my prospect in this case, who is the retiring controller. And we did a series of meetings. Of course, this was during COVID, so all of these meetings were over Zoom. But at the end of the day, we presented a fairly compelling value proposition. In this case, the controller, who had been working for this company for over 20 years, was retiring. His annual salary was about $130,000 a year. And he had been, at the end of the day, we proposed to do the accounting work for the association, for a political action committee that was associated with the association, and a foundation that was associated with the association. In this case, my colleague is actually doing the fractional CFO work, all of the financials, all of the bill pays, the receivables, the whole 9 yards, for $6,000 a month. So in this case, again, properly framing expectations for the client of both the value that you provide at, in this case, a fairly steep discount against the salary and benefit load of the employee he's essentially replacing, really made it a no-brainer. Now, at the end of the day, the client did their diligence, they checked references, they got competitive quotes from other providers. But at the end of the day, my colleague won the work and the client is deliriously happy. And again, I think I'm addressing both of the two of the three leading barriers to close. In this case, it was very clear that we were able to provide the exact work that the incumbent employee was providing. We were able to do it at a significant savings because we went from a legacy desktop-based solution to a QuickBooks Online solution, providing them with a whole set of dashboards, monthly reports, cash flow projections, and things that he wasn't getting. Again, it wasn't easy, but it wasn't rocket science. So that, the third one, and this one, no time to sell, I think points to a bigger issue. There are many firms that believe that only partners and senior staff can sell. I am vehemently against that notion, and I'm mostly against that notion because I know how little business development activity is happening during busy season at CPA firms, and you cannot stop selling just because it's busy season. That's one of the reasons why I think accounting marketers and business developers are critical, because they will keep the momentum going on those opportunities while the partners and the senior staff are locked into busy season. There is a great blog post, and I promise I will not pepper you with emails, but I will send you a follow-up email, and I will reference some great sales and marketing resources. One of them is Hinge Marketing. They published a blog post on the value of team selling versus the Rainmaker model, and I think it would be a good read for anybody that's in this course that's interested in growing a practice. This is another great slide for those of you that are thinking about starting or growing a practice. You've got to find and nurture leads and understand that while having and managing and nurturing a referral engine is good, you cannot grow a practice just based on referrals, because there's too much skin in the game to leave it just to referral business. And I go back to your thought about websites and blog content and podcast and thought leadership, and the value of having a website that is running and hopefully generating leads for you 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. I will tell you, I had my first article published in Accounting Today, September. I've been working a prospect for over a year, hadn't reached him in a while. I sent him a link to an article, the article that I got published. He opened it and immediately emailed and said, hey, can we talk on 10th at 11? And I immediately replied, yes, love to. And I say that not to blow my own horn, but to say that you never know when the next email, when the next touch point, when the next blog post, when the next reference or reference to an email or to an article, or just, hey, I saw that your firm got an award for X, and you follow up with the prospect. Those touches over time and your ability to provide with confidence in your ability, with knowledge of your industry, that you're keeping track of how their company is doing, all of those things can help you. Referrals are great, but what I would also say to you is something I referenced earlier, which is understanding where some opportunities to make quick conversions to gain momentum for your practice can also be helpful. I referenced this account where there was a retiring employee. If you know one of your clients has a CFO that's thinking about either taking another position or retiring, that may be a trigger to reevaluate whether they want to continue to have an internal accounting department, especially if it's a one-person department. So those are all things.
And it seems like we might have momentarily lost audio. If you're able to go to the audio section of your control panel and simply switch to phone and then back to computer, that should solve the issue. And while you're working to do that, if it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and run poll number 3. We'll go ahead and launch that now. Poll number 3 is now launched. How many dedicated employees are in your CAS practice? None, 1 to 3, 4 to 7, 8 or more. And we'll leave this open until everyone has a chance to submit their answers. And Ed, I believe I can hear your sound. Are you able to hear?
I am back. My apologies, folks.
All right. We can hear you loud and clear. I'm just going to close poll number 3. We've just crossed that minute mark. And
all right.
You are back with us.
I am. My apologies, folks. Let's get back on track here. We're in the home stretch. So next up on the 7 tips is be a disruptor. And let's move on to the next slide. When I say be a disruptor, a lot of my thunder has been stolen by COVID. I was sharing a joke with Christopher just as we started the call, and since I had technical difficulties getting on the call anyway, we'll just throw this a little joke in. So I heard this a few weeks ago. So COVID is like pulling up to a stop sign with your car, looking left, looking right, pulling into the intersection, and then getting hit by an airplane. And so losing my phone call on my cell phone during a webinar with 131 people on the line is probably something I'll just chalk up rather to 2020 and to COVID. That said, my reference to COVID was really about building a practice that is virtual. I find it really ironic that most of the people that are providing accounting services to their clients, whether they're through CPA firms or not, are still stuck in a bricks and mortar sort of fixation. Some of the best firms I know now, certainly, are fully virtual, especially now that COVID seems to be spiking because it's cold and people are going inside. But what I know also is that pre-COVID, the radical thinkers, the disruptors, the people were a little bit ahead of the curve, had remote workforces. And they had the tools, whether it was cloud-based QuickBooks Online or whether they were using QuickBooks Desktop through Right Networks, they were going about things in a different way. And I encourage you, if you are starting or growing or trying to grow a practice, not to get hung up on doing things the way you did in the tax practice or in the audit practice or in the financial advisory practice, because this is really a different beast. And the value of a client accounting service relationship is not about where you are. I will tell you that one of my firm clients is an Ohio-based firm. One of their biggest clients, now this particular client is struggling because they're in the hospitality industry, but one of their biggest clients for this Ohio-based accounting services practice is a 12-location quick serve food franchise. So the notion that you have to focus on clients that can hop in the car and drive to your office, or you can hop in the car and drive to their office, really goes away. And again, there is the power of having an SEO, SEM optimized website that's running 7 by 24 by 365, because you are actually out there marketing on a regular basis. If you say you want to be in the quick franchise business in a hospitality segment, then you should be going to the shows for Jimmy John's or Subway or wherever, and you could be exhibiting at that show just like the vendors who make the ovens, the vendors who sell the syrup for the soda fountain, and so forth. Because that's how you build that market. One of the other things I'll say to you, I mentioned Hinge Marketing, and I'm not getting paid by them either, but they have an ebook you can download for free called The Visible Expert. And if you really want to build a solid niche-based practice, part of what you have to do is immerse yourself in the industry. Again, I'll talk food because I know a little about it. If you're gonna be an advisor to somebody who owns a fine dining restaurant, you're gonna have to understand food costs. You're gonna have to understand menus. You're gonna have to understand table turns, and what 5 or 7 KPIs and metrics have to be in front of the owners and or partners every day, so they know how they're doing. They know how they're doing every day. They know how they're doing every week. They know how they're doing every month. Those are the kinds of things that you can do, and that's very different than a tax or audit relationship where all you're doing is looking in the rearview mirror. You want to give your clients the data to make good decisions on the fly, because that's what this relationship is about. Let's see. So we talked a little about being a disruptor. We're CAS-only firms. There are firms that run CAS practices that also have tax and audit, and then there are firms that are just standalone accounting services practices. I will tell you that typically the standalone accounting services firms have better margins. They generate more revenue per professional. They typically do better at having an annual engagement that they pre-bill on a monthly basis. Next up is think like a general manager. I know I'm going a little deep on the history here, but when I think of general managers, I think of Jack Welch from General Electric. He passed away, I think, earlier this year or maybe last year. One of the things that typically happened with people who became division presidents or CEOs is they work their way up through the general manager segment and running plants or running divisions. And part of being a general manager is the ability to look at all disciplines of the business and understand how you're creating efficiency and effectiveness, how you're taking care of clients and understanding customer satisfaction, understanding the sales and marketing process, understanding the production process. And don't think that because you're running an accounting firm, there's not a production process. That is part and parcel of running an accounting services department, is that you are in the accounting business. So instead of manufacturing widgets, you are manufacturing financial statements and doing financial transactions at volume, because instead of doing accounting for one company in an internal accounting relationship, you may be doing accounting for 500 different businesses. That could be a mix of nonprofits and small businesses and law firms and dental practices and so forth. So understanding how to deploy the right tools and the right people are critical, absolutely critical to getting the job done. And I think it may be time for our fourth polling question now, Christopher.
Absolutely. Here is our fourth and final poll for today. I would like to explore outsourcing in 30 days, 90 days, 6 months, or I don't want to explore outsourcing. We'll leave this open just like the rest until it gets that 95% mark, or it reaches 1 minute. And I see we're already over 75%. Thank you so much for getting your answers in quickly. We appreciate that. And allows us to have more time on the content. So we'll leave this open for probably another 10 or 15 seconds. Just wait on that last 8%. All right, and we will now close this in 3, 2, and 1. Back to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This last one is actually getting a new title. I had this originally as execution, but I've decided that I really need to change this to documentation. And I say documentation because, and it's certainly not going to be a mystery or a revelation to those of you on this call, because most of you are accountants or bookkeepers or your CFOs or your partners in accounting firms. Again, accounting services are it's not a new profession. It's not a new specialty, but the way it's really being executed by forward-thinking firms and forward-thinking practices is a little different than what was being done even 10 years ago. You know, pretty much everybody that's doing accounting work is in the cloud, whether it's natively with QBO and Sage Intacct, or whether it's through a Right Network server. The need to go on site to the client to do the work is not there anymore. What is important and what makes it easier to do things at scale is documentation. I mentioned Michael Gerber on this side. He wrote a book called the E-Myth Revisited, and E stands for entrepreneurial. One of his most famous quotes is, you should work on your business and not in your business. That's the one everybody takes away. A very important different quote from Michael Gerber is, without documentation, all routinized work turns into exceptions. So you have to build your practice as if you plan to build a multi-unit empire. And what, part of the underlying thesis of the E-Myth is that you should build your business like you're going to turn it into a franchise. And he talks a lot about Ray Kroc, who built the McDonald's empire. He wasn't the guy who built McDonald's. He's the guy that turned it into the engine that has made millions of millionaires. If, not because people wanted to make hamburgers or fries, but he built a business model that was duplicable and allowed people to build wealth. Ryan Lazanis is a CPA. He happens to be, I think, from Montreal or from Quebec. So he's also a chartered accountant. Somebody else you should listen to. He does a podcast called the Future Firm Accounting Podcast. He also has a blog. He has a very nice site. For those of you who are choosing to grow or build an accounting services practice, he's got some great stuff, and he's a thought leader in the industry. So building the right tools, picking the right team, documenting processes, all of that leads to effective execution, which is what you have to do when you're in a production model. When you're in the business of creating financial statements, when you're in the business of providing financial advisory and CFO level support. So that's all I wanted to talk with you guys about today. I will take you through a couple of case studies. Again, what we do is we provide offshore bookkeeping at less than $9 an hour. We can give you a full-time equivalent at $1,500 a month. We've worked with a number of CPA firms and financial, cloud-based accounting providers that focus on franchises and small businesses. One of these firms we have helped grow at a pretty meteoric pace over the last several years. And again, the work we're doing is, expense tracking and coding, accounts payable, accounts receivable, invoicing, credit card reconciliations, and bank reconciliations. These guys, again, are a fintech. We also work with some virtual accounting firms, both CPA firms and non-CPA firms. One of the firms that we work with does back office accounting for interior design firms. So they provide CFO level advisory, they do month-end close, and they provide financial advice. There's some additional resources. Again, I will send you one follow-up email if you've self-identified as wanting to talk a little more about outsourcing with us. I will reach out to you sometime in the next month or several months, depending on your feedback. And I will give you references or give you links in that follow-up email to Hinge Marketing, both building your business development team, but also on the Visible Expert, both of which are great resources if you're trying to grow a practice. I'll also send you a link to an article that I had published in Accounting Today in late September on why you should be thinking about growing accounting services in your CPA firm. I don't know if you had any questions in the chat panel, Christopher, but I'm happy to answer those with the couple of minutes we have remaining, if there are any.
Perfect. Yes, and if you have not had a chance to submit a question or you'd like to submit another question, feel free to do so now as we do have a few more minutes. We do have a question here. How do you get to know the specifics of a new niche?
You know, it's largely market research, and I'm happy to talk with you a little bit more about this. There is a woman named Gail Crosley who is a big consultant or a well-known consultant in the accounting industry. She's actually not big. She's actually, no, anyway, sorry, that was off subject. She is a proponent of using market research to understand the clients and the industry niches you want to serve. So what I would say to you is, let's say you want to explore working with home health care or elder care, seniors helping seniors, let's say. So I would say the first thing you should do is identify a half dozen or so people that are in the industry, approach them saying that you want to do market research and that it's not a sales call. Try and understand what their pain points are. Try and understand what you can about the industry, who your competitors would be if you're going after this work, what some of the industry threats and opportunities are. I would start with market research, and if you do enough of this research, you're going to find a need. You may, based on that research, you should be able to find where the opportunities are. If you're doing your homework, you should also be able to identify who you can serve most effectively. One thing I'll say is there are always going to be lots of clients out there, but if you want to build a successful, profitable practice, you also need to make sure that you're targeting the right people. Doing accounting services, you can't do a web search without finding tons of low-cost providers. And that's not necessarily, if that's not who you want to be, you're going to need to find a niche where you can find people who are willing to pay for high-end advisory services. If somebody is starting a dental practice and they're looking for an accountant, chances are pretty good they're not going to look for the cheapest person. Just like, most of us don't want the cheapest dentist, especially if we have to have a root canal. We want the best person. So part of what you have to do is find the market you want, find their pain points, and then build your solution to fit their needs. And part of that too is you is going to value your expertise and the kind of advice you want to provide. I hope that helps. If it doesn't, feel free, or if you want some clarification, feel free to reach out to me via email. Anything else in the chat panel there, Christopher?
All right, and I'm looking right now, and I think that seems to be it. Yes, that seems to be it, and we are actually at the top of the hour. So
wow, we certainly are.
Time flies when you're having fun. So we're going to get ready to wrap up today's webinar. We here at CPA Academy will process that credit later today, and that'll be available in your CPA Academy accounts within the next 24 hours. Everyone will have an opportunity for a full webinar evaluation, and those links to the evaluation are available in your accounts as well as your email. And a big thanks to our wonderful presenter, Ed, today for a great presentation. We're always appreciative of your time and insight, and a warm thank you to all of you in the audience for joining us as well. We urge you to take a look at your CPA Academy My Account page and see all of the resources we've made available to you there, and take a look at the other fantastic webinars we're able to offer. We hope to see you all on future webinars, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks again, Ed.
Thank you, Christopher. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.